president. Presidents basically hope that they can put their stamp on the Supreme Court and have that philosophy carried on long after they leave office. And this is why, you know, we don't know yet if Sotomayor will turn out to be a liberal, but chances are she's probably not going to be with Scalia on all the decisions. Whereas clearly, I think so far successfully, George W. Bush in picking Chief Justice Roberts and Alito is getting a couple of fairly conservative guys. But the senior Bush President 41, who nominated Justice Souter, who just resigned to be replaced by Sotomayor, nominated him in thinking he would be a conservative, and he turned out to be, in most issues, most cases, voting with the liberal bloc. It was often said quoted President Eisenhower said that when he nominated Earl Warren, who'd been the governor of California, and he thought Earl Warren was a good conservative Republican, it turned out he was Chief Justice during the most liberal era of the court. So no, presidents cannot be sure that their nominee will rubber stamp their ideology or philosophy. But right now, the track record is pretty good, and partly because they're vetted so closely before being nominated, and this is why, of course, they're also keeping their cards tight when they're being confirmed, because they don't really want to discuss how they would decide cases or what their specific ideology or philosophy might be, because they remember what happened to Robert Bork, who did that and didn't get confirmed.
Thank you. Other questions, please.
You had mentioned that there is now an opinion that perhaps the executive branch is expanding its power beyond perhaps what was originally dictated in the Constitution. So my question is there a methodology or a process by which the Supreme Court can correct or amend that problem?
Yes, I think just generally the system of checks and balances curtails what an executive can do beyond a certain point. And the Supreme Court plays a role in that, as well as the legislative branch. If the president does exercise broad powers, but if those in the exercise of power, the Congress were to determine that the president was behaving in an illegal manner, was not faithfully executing the laws of the country, or something like to that effect in Article 2 of the Constitution, you know, impeachment could occur ultimately.
Just a brief rebuttal to that. The other view is, of course, that incrementally, in a kind of a creeping expansion way, particularly with the national security agencies and the executive bureaucracies, the Pentagon budget, the CIA, and all of those agencies, they are less and less effectively checked and balanced by oversight by the House and Senate. The executive, I think, it has increased in power, and that's a general consensus of most historians and political scientists, at least since the Second World War. The best case of that is the fact that even the Speaker of the House was shocked to learn a few months ago that the United States engages in torture.
After she had voted for it, perhaps. I think the most important thing to point to here is that only Congress has the right to declare war. And I would say over the last 60 years, we've been in a bunch of wars, and I don't remember Congress ever declaring one of them. So I think that's the main point. In the present administration, there is a plethora of czars, and they do not have to go through Senate confirmation. It's a concept that's been used in previous administrations, and it seems to be used quite a bit in the present one. And that would be another example of the power of the executive branch growing at the expense of, I would say, primarily the legislative branch, which has been rolling over in some years.
Recently, it's been argued that the Supreme Court has been expanding the scope of its power through its activism. Do you think that's occurring, and do you think the court should be less active or more active, given that it's not elected by the electorate?
I don't think this is a recent occurrence. I think that there have been activist courts, well, in contemporary times, all along, and I think that tends to be exercised by both justices of liberal and of conservative leanings. So it really depends, I suppose, on what your political views are, whether you engage or appreciate an activist court because you like what they're trying to do or not. In terms of judicial philosophy, that really does go, I think, to the core of how a justice defines himself, and something that does come up in confirmation hearings, because there is this fear, I think, of the public of the court, because they are appointed, because they do have such tremendous power through judicial review, that if they engage in activism, judicial activism, liberally interpreting the Constitution for political reasons, that could be very expansive and very threatening. On the other hand, conservative, you could say if a philosophy of conservative interpretation of the Constitution prevailed over time, would women have ever been given the right to vote? Or, that was a constitutional amendment, obviously. But, when you look at some of our very profound and fundamental changes in constitutional rulings over the time, was that an activist court that did that? And was that a good thing? So the Constitution is certainly a living document. It's been amended a number of times, but not too many. And the court, of course, also is a living, breathing entity, and the justices do turn over. I think that's why when new appointments come on, because they don't happen so very often, we do look very carefully at who's on the court, what are their political views, what were their prior judicial rulings, what will the court look like in the next 10, 15 years. We probably will see some additional justices retire because they are getting quite old, and some of them aren't in the best of health. And that could very much change the political composition and leanings of the court as a result of retirement and resignations. We have a new president in office, and of course the president does have a tremendous power and role in selecting the kind of justice that is nominated and the potential direction the court will take.
Well, it's getting late now, and I see that some of you are leaving for other classes. I want to thank you for coming and participating and making it another successful constitutional day for Prince George's Community College.